Hi, everyone. While Shams gets back to our SIG, I'll just introduce myself quickly. So my name's Jerome. I'm in the Department of Education, and my background is initially as a secondary school teacher and then as a teacher educator in universities, but also working with teachers still in the classroom through kind of teacher grassroots organizations. And this SIG is, in a way, it's a kind of like a tiny slice of the big world that Paula was talking about, work-based learning. We're particularly interested in what unites people in the Department of Education around initial teacher education, and more broadly in the faculty, where we have people engaged with social work education, nursing, mental health professionals. So we've got lots of programs that are set up as the kind of initial route into a professional status, where lots of the organizational and pedagogic strategies are actually similar. You know, broadly, there's stuff going on at the university, but loads of the courses are actually delivered through partnerships with people who are doing the job in organizations in and around London and wider afield. And lots of the professional learning happens while you're on placement. And that also means the people who act as your professional educators aren't just the university lecturers at Middlesex, but they're also the mentors and work-based educators who are out there in the field in the NHS, in local authority social work programs, in charities, and in schools and early years providers. So we're interested in really exploring what it means to work on professional education routes with those kinds of students, and how we work in those broader educational partnerships with a whole bunch of people who are moving in and out of various roles. So one of the most significant people you might have on a professional education course as a student probably only spends an hour or two on professional education, and they spend the rest of their working week doing whatever their professional duties are. So if you're a social worker, you are a social worker for 35 hours a week, and you might be a mentor for an hour a week. So how do we work together, and how do we unpick that experience? So that will resonate, hopefully, with lots of people on the call, because in some shape or form, you will be working with people in those roles or exploring student experiences in these various contexts. So we're interested in what it's like to be a learner, professional learner, what it's like to be a professional educator, what it's like to work in these weird, nebulous, often not very well funded partnerships, how we generate the goodwill and the momentum to carry these things on, what it's like to have our work constantly reframed and redefined and refunded by policy that seems to shift every 5 to 6 years, and also how that policy migrates around. So we find that something that crops up 10 years ago in teacher education is, cropping up currently in social work education. Funding models that happen in health will be, disseminated to education in future. So we're interested in just getting a bit of a dialogue going within and across those professions, because there's a lot to learn, a lot of similarities. And what that has meant is that we have events where we have colleagues from around the faculty presenting. We also try and encourage people to join as members of the audience from around the faculty, but also we're quite good at drawing people in from the wider partnership. So now we've moved online and we've got that flexibility, then we often have people dropping in from school and health partnerships, social work partnerships, just as a bit of kind of professional development. So if you're doing research in this field and you'd like to start new conversations with colleagues who are out in the field, not just internally in academia, then we hope that the PEP seminars will be a useful forum for you to present at. And as people have said already, we're really keen. We have loads of seasoned professionals who've been doing this work for years, but we're really keen to have doctoral students and master's students share their work. And that might be kind of, just sharing reflections on their professional work, but it might also be sharing formal research projects at various stages of completion. And as other people have said already, we also quite like getting people together in little groups. So if you're aware, there are a couple of PhD or EdD students who are working in a similar area or using a similar methodology, working with a similar kind of stakeholder group, then it can be really interesting to get short presentations aligned. So we hear from 2 or 3 people who are exploring a different theme. And that starts a really interesting conversation. For example, we've had a couple of doctoral students who were working with the concept of phronesis in completely different contexts, but getting together and talking about how they discovered that concept, how they've used it, how they've turned it into a practical tool, and then sharing a little insight from their research project is just helpful for other people who are thinking about what concepts might be useful for them. So on our next event, if you want to dip into that, in the upcoming events, thanks Shams, is Garana Henry, who we have a master's program in the Department of Education, which is for practicing teachers. So a lot of it is based around modules, kind of experiential learning or reflecting on aspects of your professional work. And so she's sharing her dissertation research project that she completed in her own workplace. That's coming up on Monday, still time to sign up for that. If you just go to past events, Shams, just want to give a very quick flavor of the kinds of things we do, because as I said, lots of this is focused on the substance of professional education, but we're also keen on getting professional educators in to talk about their own research and their own research journey. And for me, being a professional educator means that you are moving between being a professional, for example, being a teacher, being a professional educator, for example, being a mentor, and very often being a consumer of, a user of, and a producer of practice-based research. So we're interested in people's journey into research. So you can see on this list, that one next to the little, whatever that's called, that little bauble thing, action research, that was one of our master's students who was sharing her work with Lynette, who's one of our tutors, on an action research module, exploring her work in supplementary schools and how you move supplementary schools and language teaching into the online domain. Underneath that, you can see a couple of presentations from Gillian Lazar, who is one of our colleagues at Middlesex, but has spent decades producing educational resources for classroom practitioners. And then she got her doctorate through reflecting on those decades worth of experience. So there's some really interesting presentations there. Useful if you're doing a doctorate by published works, but actually really useful for anyone who's doing research in the professional sphere who will want to disseminate that research through helping other practitioners. So lots of our research will find its way into academic journals, but will also find its way back into classrooms through developing material for practitioners. So there's some stuff there. If you scroll down a bit further, Shams, carry on. And then that one underneath sorry, stop there. That's the one, ethics and online research. So this, I thought you might, if you just click into that, might be of interest to anyone who is doing any research online, which for lots of us now is kind of half our life and most of our professional life. So it's become more relevant. And so we're also using the PEP seminars just to explore these kind of broader issues around methodology and ethics that we all have to engage with. So this came out of a discussion in the ethics committee about how do we work with people online, and how do we work with data that already exists online. We had a couple of colleagues, one from outside the university, Joanne McKenzie, who's done work in Mumsnet, and so that's kind of joining a pre-existing group and talking about the ethics of kind of getting into that group and then reusing those people's conversations as data. And then underneath that, a completely contrasting presentation from a sociology colleague at Middlesex, who went online and culled the online existence of a young girl who was radicalized into ISIS, to start to work back and think about that process of self-radicalization. So he's made an amazing contribution to the literature, but actually we asked him just to come and talk about the ethics of talking about young people through the representations, that the kind of trail they'd left online that wasn't intended for him as a researcher, but was part of their own process of kind of self-discovery and ultimately of self-radicalization. So we tried to take that kind of the general discussion about, oh, isn't it interesting to do online research, and really kind of push at the edges of what ethical conundrums are we're confronted with as researcher practitioners in dealing with that. So that's a little flavor of kind of what we're up to. You don't need to be researching radicalization and ISIS and dealing with matters of life and death. You can be dealing with any aspect of professional practice. If you think you've got something you'd like to talk about, but it's not a whole presentation, then drop me a line, and generally it's easy to pair you up with someone else who wants to talk about the same thing, share the pressure, share the prep, and we'll build it into a facilitated conversation where you can make a contribution. Thanks.